There's a moment that happens to every automotive enthusiast, usually somewhere around their third or fourth luxury SUV, when you realize that perfection might actually be the enemy of passion. I had that moment last Tuesday, standing between a 2027 Maserati Levante Trofeo and a Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT, and what I discovered fundamentally changed how I think about what we've been calling the best luxury performance SUV for the past 2 decades. Let me be clear from the start. The Porsche Cayenne is an engineering masterpiece. When it launched in 2002, enthusiasts like us thought Porsche had lost their minds. An SUV from the company that gave us the 911? But Porsche did something remarkable. They proved that a 2-ton luxury SUV could handle like a sports car, and in doing so, they wrote the rulebook that every other manufacturer has been following ever since. The Cayenne saved Porsche financially and gave us the 918 Spyder and the GT3 RS. We owe this vehicle respect. But here's what nobody wants to say out loud. In their relentless pursuit of perfection, in their determination to make the Cayenne faster, more capable, and more refined with each generation, Porsche has engineered out the very thing that makes us fall in love with automobiles in the first place. They created a machine so competent, so flawless in its execution, that it's become almost anonymous in its excellence. And the 2027 Maserati Levante doesn't just compete with the Cayenne. It exposes this fundamental weakness in a way that's impossible to ignore once you've experienced it. The difference begins not with specifications or lap times, but with philosophy. This matters more than you might think, especially when you're spending north of $150,000 on a vehicle that's supposed to stir something inside you every time you press the start button. Porsche approaches automotive engineering the way a Swiss watchmaker approaches a chronograph. Every component serves a purpose. Every system integrates seamlessly. Tolerances measured in microns. The result is breathtaking in its precision, but here's the question we should be asking. When did we start valuing predictability over personality? Maserati comes from an entirely different tradition. This is a company born in Bologna in 1914, a company whose logo features Neptune's trident from the Piazza Maggiore fountain. Their racing heritage includes 9 Formula One constructor championships, when F1 was still dangerous and drivers were gladiators. Fangio drove for Maserati. Moss drove for Maserati. The 250F is considered one of the most beautiful racing cars ever created. When Maserati engineers sit down to design a powertrain or suspension system, they're not asking themselves how to achieve the optimal lap time. They're asking how to create an experience that reminds you why you became an automotive enthusiast in the first place. This philosophical difference manifests in every aspect of these vehicles, starting with what you see before you even open the door. The Cayenne's design language is aggressive, angular, purposeful. It looks fast standing still. Wide haunches, sharp character lines, that distinctive Porsche face. It's immediately recognizable, undeniably attractive, and thoroughly modern. But walk around it 3 times and ask yourself this: could you describe a single element that isn't shared with 20 other performance SUVs? The design is excellent, but it's excellent in the way that a perfectly tailored business suit is excellent. Professional, appropriate, entirely forgettable. Now look at the Levante. The proportions are longer, lower, more reminiscent of a grand touring car that's been given slightly more ground clearance than a shooting brake. The greenhouse is more graceful. The surface tension across the body panels creates highlight lines that change depending on the light and viewing angle, something Italian designers learned from decades of shaping aluminum by hand. This is coach building tradition applied to modern manufacturing. The trident on the grille isn't just a logo. It's a statement of origin, a declaration that this machine comes from somewhere specific, with specific values. Step inside, and the distinction becomes even more pronounced. The Cayenne's interior is a triumph of German engineering logic. Everything is exactly where your hand expects it to be. The digital displays are crisp and responsive. The materials are high quality, properly fitted, designed to withstand decades of use. Sit in a 10-year-old Cayenne and the interior still feels contemporary. This is the interior equivalent of a luxury hotel. Expensive, comfortable, utterly professional, and completely indistinguishable from the last 3 luxury hotels you stayed in. The Levante's cabin is something different entirely. The dashboard architecture flows asymmetrically, creating a sense that you're sitting in something designed around the driver rather than optimized for manufacturing efficiency. The analog clock at the top of the center stack serves no practical purpose in 2027. But it's there because time is precious and mechanical movements have soul. The leather isn't just perforated. It's hand-stitched with a technique that dates back to when Maserati was making seats for racing cars. You can see the individual stitches, slightly irregular because human hands made them. The carbon fiber trim isn't a decal. It's actual woven carbon, and you can feel the texture under your fingertips. Here's what matters about these details. At this stage of your life, you've owned enough vehicles to know that the initial thrill of a new car fades after about 6 weeks. What sustains the relationship is whether the vehicle continues to reveal layers of depth and character over months and years of ownership. A perfectly executed interior becomes invisible. An interior with personality becomes more interesting over time. But we're not buying 7-figure art cars. These are performance SUVs, and they need to deliver on the performance promise. This is where things get genuinely interesting. Because on paper, the Cayenne should absolutely destroy the Levante. The Turbo GT produces 631 horsepower from its 4.0-liter twin-turbo V8. 0 to 60 happens in 3.1 seconds. Top speed is 186 miles per hour. The 8-speed PDK transmission shifts faster than you can think. Porsche active suspension management, rear axle steering, carbon ceramic brakes, torque vectoring. The specification sheet reads like a greatest hits compilation of automotive technology. The Levante Trofeo counters with the Nettuno engine, a 3.0-liter twin-turbo V6 that produces 580 horsepower. 0 to 60 takes 3.8 seconds. Top speed is 187 miles per hour. Though that's almost certainly just Maserati being cheeky about beating the Cayenne's number by 1 mile per hour. On paper, the Porsche is faster, more powerful, more advanced. And if automotive enthusiasm were about specifications, this conversation would be over. But you and I both know that the numbers stopped mattering about 15 years ago, right around the time when every performance car started hitting 60 miles per hour in under 4 seconds. What matters now is how these machines deliver their performance, and this is where the Levante exposes the Cayenne's fundamental weakness. The Nettuno engine is a technological marvel that Maserati developed for the MC20 supercar. It features a pre-chamber combustion system inspired by Formula One technology, where a small secondary combustion chamber allows for more aggressive ignition timing and higher compression ratios. But here's what that means in practice, stripped of the marketing language. When you're in third gear at 4,000 RPM and you squeeze the throttle, the Nettuno responds with an immediacy that feels almost naturally aspirated. The power builds linearly, progressively, with a sound that rises in intensity and pitch as you approach the 7,500 RPM redline. It feels like an engine that was designed by people who remember when throttle response meant an actual mechanical connection between your right foot and the intake system. The Cayenne's V8 produces its peak torque at 2,000 RPM and holds it flat until 4,500 RPM. This is the signature of modern turbocharged efficiency. Mathematically, it's superior. The engine delivers maximum thrust across a wider RPM range. The PDK transmission can keep you with the meat of the power band regardless of what you're doing. But here's what gets lost in that efficiency. The sense of building drama, the feeling that you're working with the machine to extract performance rather than simply requesting it from a computer system. The Cayenne goes faster with less effort, and that sounds like a good thing until you realize that the effort is actually part of the reward. The transmission calibration reveals the same philosophical divide. The PDK is faster than any human could ever shift manually. In automatic mode, it predicts what you want before you want it. In manual mode, the paddles execute shifts in milliseconds. It's so good that Porsche doesn't even offer a manual transmission option anymore, and honestly, you wouldn't want one. The PDK is objectively superior in every measurable way. Maserati uses a ZF-sourced 8-speed automatic. The same basic unit you'll find in everything from a BMW X5 to a Jeep Grand Cherokee. But the calibration tells you everything about the difference between competence and character. In manual mode, the Levante holds gears longer than logic suggests you should. It downshifts more aggressively under braking. There's a slight delay in the shift action, just enough to give you a sense of mechanical events happening rather than electronic instructions being executed. Is it slower? Technically, yes. Does it make you more engaged with the driving experience? Absolutely. The chassis dynamics follow the same pattern. Porsche's engineers have spent 2 decades teaching an SUV how to corner like a 911. The Cayenne's lateral grip numbers are absurd. The body control is exceptional. Turn into a corner at speeds that should trigger survival instincts, and the Cayenne simply rotates around the radius with minimal body roll, perfect weight distribution, and an almost eerie sense of composure. It's genuinely impressive, right up until you realize that you could be driving almost any modern performance SUV with your eyes closed and achieve similar results. The systems are so competent that they've eliminated the need for skill. The Levante takes a different approach. It has adaptive dampers, air suspension, and electronic differential control, all the same technology you'll find in the Cayenne. But the calibration prioritizes communication over absolute grip. You can feel the weight transfer under braking. You sense the front tires loading up as you turn in. There's a subtle looseness to the rear end that reminds you that you're driving something with actual mass and momentum. Push it to the limit and yes, it'll break traction sooner than the Cayenne. But here's what we've forgotten in our pursuit of ever higher skid pad numbers. Driving at the limit on public roads is both illegal and idiotic. What matters in real-world driving is how much information the chassis communicates at 7/10. And the Levante tells you a story that the Cayenne has optimized out of existence. Now we arrive at the heart of the weakness that the Levante exposes, and it's not about performance or capability. It's about something more fundamental. The Cayenne has become a victim of its own success. Porsche has sold over 1.2 million Cayennes since 2002. Walk through any affluent neighborhood, any country club parking lot, any luxury hotel valet stand, and you'll see them. The Cayenne is the default choice, the rational decision, the safe bet. It's what successful people buy when they want a fast, luxurious, practical SUV and don't want to think too hard about the decision. There's nothing wrong with that. The Cayenne is successful because it deserves to be, but at a certain point in your life, probably right around the time you're shopping for a luxury performance SUV, the safe bet stops being appealing. You've made the rational choice enough times. You've bought the German car with the perfect reliability record. You've selected the option that Consumer Reports recommended, and somewhere along the way, you've realized that nobody ever tells stories about the time they made the sensible choice. Maserati delivered just under 7,000 Levantes to customers in North America last year. You're not going to see another one in your neighborhood. When you pull into Cars and Coffee, people will actually walk over to look at it. Not because it's necessarily better than the Cayenne, but because it's different, because it represents a choice made with the heart rather than a spreadsheet. That exclusivity is part of what you're buying, and it's worth considering whether that matters to you. The ownership experience reflects this distinction in practical ways that you need to understand before making a decision. Porsche dealerships are efficient, professional, and numerous. You can get your Cayenne service almost anywhere. Parts availability is excellent. Resale values are strong and predictable. This is the rational ownership experience, designed to minimize friction and maximize convenience. Maserati dealerships are fewer and further between. Service appointments might require planning ahead. Parts can sometimes take longer to arrive. Resale values are less predictable because the market for Italian luxury is smaller and more selective. But here's the other side of that equation. Maserati owners tend to be more passionate about their vehicles. The communities are smaller but more engaged. The dealers treat you like a guest rather than a transaction because they can't afford to be complacent about customer relationships. Is the Maserati ownership experience more challenging? Yes. But at this stage of your life, you probably have enough vehicles that you're not dependent on any single one for daily transportation. The question isn't whether the Levante is as convenient as the Cayenne. The question is whether the reward of owning something with real personality justifies the occasional inconvenience. Let's talk about the elephant in the room that every review tries to ignore because it makes us uncomfortable. The Cayenne is too good. Porsche's engineers have systematically eliminated every flaw, every quirk, every characteristic that might interfere with absolute performance. In doing so, they created a machine that's virtually indistinguishable from every other overly capable German performance SUV. The steering feel, the brake pedal response, the throttle mapping, even the sound composer that pipes engine noise through the speakers. It's all been optimized to the point where the human element has been engineered out. The Levante retains imperfections. The steering has more weight variation than modern standards suggest it should. The brake pedal feel is good but not Porsche perfect. The ride quality varies more between comfort and sport modes than contemporary tuning would allow. These aren't flaws, they're characteristics, and they remind you that you're driving something designed by people who still believe that the connection between driver and machine matters more than the lap time at the Nürburgring. Here's a test I suggest you perform. Go drive both vehicles back to back on the same road, not at the track, not at illegal speeds, just a good road that you know well, preferably something with elevation changes and a variety of corner types. Drive the Cayenne first. Marvel at its competence. Appreciate how effortlessly it dispatches challenging sections. Note how composed and unflappable it remains regardless of what you throw at it. Then switch to the Levante and pay attention to how you feel over the next 30 minutes. You'll probably notice that you're more engaged. You're thinking more about line choice, about throttle application, about how to work with the chassis, rather than simply trusting it to handle everything for you. The Levante makes you a participant in the driving experience rather than a supervisor of automated systems. And at the end of that 30-minute drive, ask yourself which vehicle made you smile more. That's the answer you need. The automotive landscape in 2027 is more homogenized than it's ever been. Platform sharing, shared powertrains, global safety regulations, and corporate consolidation have created a situation where vehicles from different manufacturers are more similar than they are different. The Cayenne represents the pinnacle of this trend. It's the best version of what happens when engineering excellence is the only goal. The Levante represents resistance to that trend. It's a vehicle designed by people who still believe that cars should have nationality, that engineering decisions should be influenced by culture and tradition, that the way a machine makes you feel is at least as important as how fast it goes. In exposing the Cayenne's weakness, the Levante isn't making an argument about performance or capability. It's making an argument about what we lose when we optimize away everything except efficiency. You've worked hard to reach a point in life where you can afford vehicles like these. You've made the responsible choices, built the successful career, handled the obligations. At some point, you've earned the right to make a decision based purely on what speaks to you emotionally rather than what makes sense on paper. The Cayenne is the smart choice, the one that your accountant and insurance agent and rational mind would approve. The Levante is the choice you make when you decide that life's too short to always be sensible. Neither choice is wrong. If you value absolute performance, cutting-edge technology, and minimal ownership friction, the Cayenne is genuinely excellent at providing those things. But if you're tired of excellent and you're ready for something with soul, something that feels like it was designed by people who still remember why we fell in love with cars in the first place, the Levante offers something the Cayenne simply cannot match. The sense that you're driving a machine with a point of view, with character, with an identity that extends beyond its specifications. The weakness the Levante exposes isn't in the Cayenne's engineering or performance. It's in the underlying assumption that perfection is the goal. Because perfection, when you achieve it, is often disappointing. It leaves nothing to the imagination, nothing to discover, nothing to fall in love with beyond that initial moment of appreciation. The Levante reminds us that imperfection, when it comes from passion rather than incompetence, is actually what makes machines worth living with. So here's my challenge to you. Forget everything you've read in comparison tests. Ignore the lap times and acceleration figures. Stop worrying about resale value and reliability ratings for just a moment. Go experience both of these vehicles and trust your emotional response. One of them will feel like the obvious choice based on logic and reason. The other will feel like it was designed specifically for someone like you, someone who understands that the best things in life are rarely the most sensible things. The automotive world needs both the Cayenne and the Levante. We need manufacturers who push the boundaries of what's possible through relentless engineering. We also need manufacturers who remind us that cars can be more than the sum of their specifications, that they can express culture and tradition and personality. The choice between them isn't about which is better. It's about who you are and what you value at this particular moment in your life. 20 years from now, when everything is electric and autonomous and optimized by artificial intelligence, when the entire concept of driving pleasure has been relegated to closed circuits and virtual reality, you'll remember the vehicles you owned during this transitional period. You'll remember whether you chose the path of perfection or the path of passion. That memory, that experience, that story you tell about why you bought what you bought, that's what you're really purchasing here. Choose accordingly. I want to tell you about a conversation I had last week with a fellow enthusiast who's owned 5 Porsche Cayennes over the past 15 years. He just traded his latest Turbo S for a 2027 Maserati Levante Trofeo. And when I asked him why, his answer stopped me cold. He said, I finally realized that Porsche had engineered out everything I actually loved about driving. That single statement unlocked something I'd been sensing, but couldn't articulate, and it's led me to a controversial conclusion. The 2027 Maserati Levante doesn't just compete with the Porsche Cayenne. It reveals fundamental weaknesses in what we've been told is the benchmark for luxury performance SUVs. Now, before the Porsche faithful start typing angry comments, let me establish something crucial. I have enormous respect for the Cayenne. When it arrived in 2002, purists predicted it would destroy Porsche's reputation. Instead, it saved the company financially and enabled the development of the Carrera GT, the 918 Spider, and every modern GT3 we've enjoyed over the past 2 decades. The Cayenne proved that a luxury SUV could handle with the precision of a sports car, and every manufacturer from Lamborghini to Aston Martin followed Porsche's blueprint. This vehicle rewrote automotive history, and that achievement deserves recognition. But here's what happens when you become the benchmark. You become the standard against which everything else is measured, and in that process, you often lose the very qualities that made you special in the first place. The 2027 Cayenne is faster than ever, more technologically advanced than we could have imagined 20 years ago, and more capable than any SUV has a right to be. It's also become something unexpected, predictable, clinical, and dare I say it, somewhat soulless in its relentless pursuit of perfection. The Levante exposes this weakness not through superior performance, but by reminding us what we sacrificed in the name of engineering excellence. The distinction begins with something most reviews ignore because it's difficult to quantify: philosophical intent. Porsche approaches automotive development like a surgical procedure. Every component serves a measurable purpose. Every system integrates with mathematical precision. Variables are controlled, tolerances are minimized, and the result is a machine that performs exactly as intended under all conditions. This is Germanic engineering at its finest, the same mindset that produces timepieces with 50-year warranties and industrial machinery that runs continuously for decades without failure. Maserati comes from an entirely different tradition, one rooted in the chaos and passion of Italian motorsport history. This company was founded in Bologna in 1914 by 5 brothers who raced motorcycles before building their first automobile. Their trident logo comes from the Neptune fountain in Piazza Maggiore, a symbol of power and maritime dominance. Juan Manuel Fangio won 2 Formula One World Championships driving Maserati 250 SS. Sterling Moss called the 250F the finest racing car he ever piloted. When you understand this heritage, you realize that Maserati engineers aren't trying to optimize systems for maximum efficiency. They're trying to create machines that trigger emotional responses, that remind you why speed and sound and mechanical symphony matter. This philosophical difference manifests immediately in the design language. The Cayenne's exterior is aggressive and modern, with sharp character lines, wide haunches, and that unmistakable Porsche face. It looks purposeful and fast, exactly what you'd expect from a performance SUV. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Close your eyes and describe the Cayenne's design. Then describe an Audi RS Q8, a BMW X6M, or a Mercedes-AMG GLE 63. You'll struggle to articulate meaningful differences because modern German performance SUVs have converged on an aesthetic formula that prioritizes aerodynamic efficiency over distinctive character. The Levante takes a different approach entirely. The proportions are longer and lower, more reminiscent of a grand touring car than a traditional SUV. The roofline flows gracefully toward the rear, creating a silhouette that suggests motion even at standstill.